In alien sector K9X, far beyond the safe trade routes of the galaxy, the planet Illyrion Prime was dying. The sky burned with strange colors as enemy ships filled the orbit, their shadows covering cities that had never known true war before. The people of Illyrion Prime had believed neutrality would protect them, but neutrality meant nothing to those who came to conquer. Defense platforms exploded one by one, sending fire and broken metal raining down into the upper atmosphere. The once orderly traffic lanes were now filled with wreckage and escape pods drifting without direction. Alarms echoed through underground shelters where families waited in silence, knowing that every minute brought the end closer. At the heart of the planet, inside the central defense spire, Supreme Commander Veil-Kor Threx stood before a shattered star map, his armor scorched. One of his lower arms injured, yet his posture remained firm. He had commanded fleets for over 100 cycles, but he had never seen a collapse this fast. The enemy had studied Illyrion Prime carefully, striking power grids, communication arrays, and shipyards first, leaving no chance for organized resistance. Reports continued to arrive, each worse than the last. Orbital ring lost, moon base silent, third defense fleet destroyed near the inner asteroid belt. Veil-Kor knew the truth before anyone said it aloud. Illyrion Prime could not be saved by its own strength. The galaxy was vast, yet strangely empty when help was needed most. The Galactic Concord had been warned weeks earlier, but debates and protocols moved slowly. Permission for intervention was still under discussion while cities burned. Veil-Kor felt something close to despair, a feeling his species rarely allowed itself to experience. He looked around the command chamber at officers who had served him since their youth, now waiting for an order he did not want to give. There was one final option, an action considered shameful and pointless by most advanced civilizations, the broadcast of an unrestricted SOS, a signal sent without filters, without promises, without certainty of rescue. Such calls were often ignored or exploited. Some species believed answering them invited destruction. Others believed only fools cried into the void. Veil-Kor remembered the ancient records, stories of worlds erased after sending such calls. Yet he also remembered the faces of the civilians below, the children hiding in shelters, the elders who had built Illyrion Prime from barren stone. He realized pride no longer mattered. Survival did. He authorized the release of the SOS. Technicians hesitated for only a moment before obeying. Powerful transmitters came online across the planet, focusing their energy into a single desperate message. It carried coordinates, threat data, and a simple plea for aid. It was sent in every known galactic language, and many forgotten ones, aimed not at allies, but at anyone listening. As the signal left the system, enemy forces detected the surge. Their commanders laughed openly on intercepted channels, mocking the idea that help would arrive in time. Some even allowed the transmission to continue, confident that no one would be foolish enough to answer. The SOS traveled through broken star lanes, past dead systems and silent worlds, crossing regions marked as hazardous and uninhabitable. It passed through sensor nets of species who ignored it, dismissed it, or marked it as irrelevant noise. The message kept moving, carried by hope rather than probability. Inside the defense spire, Veil-Kor watched the timer counting down to planetary collapse. Evacuation efforts saved only a fraction of the population, and every moment felt heavier than the last. Yet something had changed. The act of sending the SOS lifted a small weight from his mind. He had done everything possible, even the unthinkable. He stood silently as the lights flickered, knowing the galaxy might never respond, but also knowing that somewhere, in the endless darkness, a species might hear the call and choose to answer, even if it meant facing impossible odds. What Veil-Kor did not know, what no one in Sector K9X could imagine, was that the signal had just entered a region of space, watched by a species born on a violent world, a species familiar with desperation, a species that did not ignore cries for help, even when the cost was war. The SOS signal did not fade after leaving alien sector K9X. It continued moving through space like a quiet scream, crossing dead zones where no life had survived for centuries, passing by trading empires that chose not to listen, until it finally entered human exploration grid E17, a region watched constantly by Earth's deep space sensors. Inside a vast orbital station above Sol 3, human analysts noticed the anomaly almost immediately. The signal pattern was old, desperate, and raw, not encrypted properly, not disguised, just a plea sent by someone who had run out of options. Many signals like this were normally filtered out, but something about this one made the system flag it for review. Technicians gathered as data streams filled the room, showing images of a planet under attack, orbital structures breaking apart, and casualty estimates climbing too fast to count. The room fell silent. Not because humans had never seen war, but because they had seen it too often, and they understood exactly what they were looking at. The signal was forwarded to United Terran Command on Earth, where military leaders, scientists, and diplomats reviewed it together. The location was far beyond established human borders, deep in alien-controlled space. Responding would mean crossing regions marked as unstable, hostile, and politically dangerous. Several advisors immediately warned against intervention, reminding everyone that humanity was still considered an unpredictable species by the wider galaxy. Humans had earned that reputation honestly. They came from a world of crushing gravity, violent weather, deadly predators, and constant natural disasters, even before leaving their planet. Humans had fought wars among themselves that wiped out millions, yet somehow they endured, adapted, and rebuilt every time. Alien researchers later called them Deathworlders, a term used for species that should not have survived their home planets. Across the galaxy, Deathworlders were feared, not because they were always aggressive, but because they were stubborn, emotional, and dangerously creative under pressure. Most species avoided direct conflict with them, and many councils preferred humanity remain distant and uninvolved. As the briefing continued, simulations showed the likely outcome of a rescue attempt: high casualties, massive resource loss, and the possibility of starting a wider interstellar war. The Galactic Concord had already advised caution, suggesting observation only, not action. Then a quieter voice spoke in the chamber, an old fleet commander who had survived Earth's earliest off-world conflicts. He pointed out something the numbers could not measure. The SOS was not a military challenge. It was a surrender to fate, a request made by a people who knew they were about to disappear. The room changed after that. Humans did not share a single culture or belief, but one idea was deeply rooted across their history. When someone calls for help, you listen first and decide the cost later. Records were pulled up showing Earth's past, disaster relief missions, rescue efforts launched into impossible conditions, soldiers sent not to conquer but to extract civilians. Humanity had always mixed mercy with force, compassion with teeth, and this situation felt familiar. A vote was called, not because procedure demanded it, but because responsibility did. One by one, hands were raised, some with hesitation, some with quiet certainty. The final count favored intervention, not because success was guaranteed, but because ignoring the call would be worse. Orders were issued across Terran space. Dormant fleets were reactivated, medical ships were prepared, and combat vessels were armed for a mission no one else was willing to take. Classified channels lit up with movement, and a task force began forming faster than any previous deployment. As preparations continued, alien observers monitoring human activity noticed the sudden surge. Whispers spread through nearby sectors. Deathworlders were mobilizing, and no one knew why. Some assumed humanity was preparing for expansion. Others feared retaliation for old diplomatic slights. Very few considered the truth. Back on Earth, no speeches were made, no heroic announcements broadcast to the public. This was not about glory. It was about answering a voice that had reached them through the dark. The SOS signal continued repeating in the background, still unanswered by anyone else, still carrying the fear of a dying world. And as human ships powered their engines, one thing became clear. The species born of hostile worlds had heard the call, and they were already on the move. The decision to respond to the SOS did not end the debate. It only changed its shape. Inside United Terran Command, the atmosphere became heavy as responsibility settled in. Answering a call so far beyond human space meant stepping into unknown wars, unknown politics, and unknown consequences. Yet the order had been given, and now humanity had to decide how to act. Strategists reviewed maps showing alien sector K9X, a region marked with warnings and broken data. Jump lanes were unstable, hostile fleets were active, and no reliable allies existed nearby. Some officers argued for a small scouting force. Others suggested sending only humanitarian ships. But those ideas were quickly challenged. The SOS data clearly showed a full-scale invasion, not a disaster that medicine alone could fix. Human history offered many lessons. When help arrived weak, it often arrived too late. And when it arrived unprepared, it created more deaths than it prevented. That truth guided the next decision. If humanity was going to answer, it would do so with strength, not to conquer, but to survive the storm waiting on the other side. Fleet Command authorized the creation of Task Force Iron Mercy, a name chosen carefully. Iron to represent force, mercy to represent purpose. This would not be a symbolic gesture. It would be a full intervention, capable of fighting its way through enemy space and holding ground long enough to save lives. At the center of the task force stood the UTS Resolute Dawn, one of Earth's most advanced capital ships, designed to operate independently for long campaigns. Its hull bore the scars of earlier conflicts, and its systems were upgraded repeatedly after every war humanity had learned from. Command of the ship was given to Captain Elias Rourke, a veteran officer known for calm judgment under pressure and an unusual habit of prioritizing evacuations even during active combat. Alongside the flagship, escort vessels were assigned the UTS Black Horizon, specialized in troop deployment and medical evacuation, the UTS Iron Veil, a heavy assault cruiser built to disable larger ships without destroying them outright, and the UTS Silent Spear, a fast strike vessel designed for flanking maneuvers and deep space interdiction. Each ship was commanded by officers chosen not just for skill, but for restraint. As orders spread across Terran space, crews were recalled from leave, reserve pilots returned to their cockpits. Engineers worked without rest to prepare jump drives for extended travel. The task force grew rapidly, not because humanity was eager for war, but because humans understood that hesitation could cost millions of lives on Illyrian Prime. Warnings continued to arrive from outside powers. Encrypted messages from the Galactic Concord advised delay, observation, or non-involvement. Some even suggested the SOS might be bait, designed to lure Deathworlders into a trap. These warnings were logged, reviewed, and acknowledged. Then quietly set aside. Humanity had learned long ago that fear of traps could not outweigh certainty of suffering. Captain Rourke addressed his crew shortly before departure. He did not speak of heroism or destiny. He spoke of responsibility. He reminded them that somewhere, a world was counting down its final hours, and that every system they checked, every drill they ran, mattered, because mistakes would be paid for by people they might never meet. Across the fleet, similar briefings took place. Soldiers understood they were not being sent to win territory. Pilots knew they were not chasing medals. Medics prepared for casualties that would not be human. A quiet seriousness settled over the task force, the kind that appeared only when people knew exactly what was at stake. When Task Force Iron Mercy finally aligned for jump, space around them filled with energy distortions. Engines hummed with restrained power, and countdown timers reached zero. No dramatic music played. No speeches echoed through the fleet. Just a shared understanding that turning back was no longer an option. As the ships vanished into jump space, observers across nearby sectors took notice. Long-range sensors detected a coordinated human fleet moving toward restricted regions. Rumors began spreading almost immediately. Deathworlders were mobilizing. Some assumed aggression, others feared retaliation. None suspected that the movement was driven by a single unanswered cry for help. Inside the UTS Resolute Dawn, Captain Rourke watched the stars stretch and vanish, knowing that when they emerged, diplomacy would likely be over, and survival would depend on action. Yet he felt no doubt, because humanity had made its choice, not based on fear or gain, but on a simple truth carried across history. When someone asks for help, and you have the power to answer, refusing is a decision too. Human ships emerged from jump space into combat zone K9X Gamma, a region already swarming with enemy fleets. The alien ships were sleek and deadly, their weapon systems calibrated for rapid strikes and planetary bombardment. Yet the sudden appearance of humans took them by surprise. Sensors could not immediately identify the threat. And by the time they realized what was approaching, the UTS Resolute Dawn and its escorts had already begun positioning themselves strategically. Captain Elias Rourke issued calm, precise commands. His crew responded instantly, adjusting shields, targeting enemy capital ships, and preparing boarding teams. The human approach was unusual by alien standards. They did not hesitate or slow down for observation. They moved with purpose, combining aggression with protection, ensuring civilians on Illyrian Prime had a chance to escape orbital strikes. On the bridge of the Resolute Dawn, tactical displays showed alien formations, clusters of warships moving to intercept, and distant planetary rings under fire. Rourke's eyes scanned constantly, noting weak points and predicting enemy maneuvers. He ordered simultaneous attacks on supply and communication ships, aiming not to annihilate everything, but to disrupt enemy coordination. A strategy humans had perfected in centuries of conflict. Alongside the flagship, UTS Black Horizon deployed rapid response teams to orbital stations and escape corridors, transporting evacuees, securing damaged space elevators, and assisting defensive platforms that were still operational. The ship's medics prepared triage zones for civilians injured by debris and energy blasts. Every action was synchronized, every crew member moving as part of a single organism. The UTS Iron Veil engaged alien capital ships directly, using heavy ordnance to disable engines and weapons without destroying the hulls. The idea was to prevent pursuit and allow human boarding parties to neutralize threats. Captain Jonas Hale coordinated strikes with precision, ensuring minimal risk to evacuees, a methodical display of force that the aliens had not expected. The UTS Silent Spear, under Captain Arjun Patel, executed flanking maneuvers through asteroid fields and orbital debris, striking lightly defended enemy vessels from angles they did not anticipate. The speed and unpredictability of these attacks caused confusion, and the aliens began retreating from certain sectors to reorganize, only to find humans had already anticipated those moves, cutting off escape routes. Meanwhile, on the surface of Illyrian Prime, Supreme Commander Veilcor Threx watched through orbital communications. Astonishment reflected on his face as human forces adapted to conditions that had defeated his own fleets. Their boarding teams navigated toxic atmospheres, zero-gravity sections, and heavily damaged stations without hesitation. Each action precise, controlled, and effective. Alien pilots attempted counterattacks, firing plasma arrays and missile swarms at the advancing humans, yet the Deathworlders had prepared for such resistance. Shield matrices dynamically adjusted to energy spikes, automated point defense systems intercepted projectiles, and human pilots executed evasive maneuvers that alien engineers had not predicted. Every attack countered with minimal casualties, demonstrating that humans did not rely on numbers alone, but on skill and adaptability. As the battle unfolded, small human teams landed on critical orbital platforms, securing control nodes, rescuing trapped civilians, and shutting down enemy weapons. Medics treated injuries in real time, while engineers restored partial functionality to damaged defense systems. The aliens had underestimated human coordination, believing that such widespread, simultaneous operations were impossible. Back on the Resolute Dawn, Captain Rourke observed alien formations collapsing, their communication networks jammed, and morale dropping rapidly. He remained vigilant, issuing new orders as threats evolved. The human task force moved like a single organism, a combination of planning, instinct, and relentless determination. By the time enemy reinforcements arrived, human ships had already created choke points, evacuated civilians, and disabled major offensive capabilities. The aliens realized that these Deathworlders were unlike any species they had encountered before. They did not retreat. They did not hesitate. And their compassion for non-combatants seemed to guide, rather than limit, their power. Veilcor Threx, observing through multiple channels, finally understood why humans had been called Deathworlders, not just because they survived harsh conditions, but because they thrived under extreme pressure, turning desperation into strategy, fear into action, and chaos into organized resistance. The arrival of humans had transformed a hopeless situation into a coordinated counteroffensive. The battle was far from over, yet the tone had shifted. Human forces were no longer just responding, they were dictating the fight, and the aliens were beginning to understand that this species born on a violent world did not merely fight to survive. They fought to protect, to rescue, and to win, without abandoning their purpose. From the shattered command center of Illyrian Prime, Supreme Commander Veilcor Threx watched the unfolding battle with a mixture of awe and disbelief. Human forces had not only arrived, but were performing beyond all expectations. They moved with a combination of precision and daring that no alien fleet had ever anticipated. Every maneuver was coordinated, every strike calculated to minimize civilian harm while maximizing enemy disruption. On the surface, human ground teams deployed rapidly, moving through ruined cities and collapsed infrastructure. Evacuees were guided along secure routes while soldiers carried supplies, stabilized injured civilians, and neutralized hostile remnants. The human soldiers were resilient, unflinching under fire, and somehow always seemed one step ahead of their attackers. Commander Maya Chen led one of these squads from the UTS Black Horizon, coordinating her team with calm authority. Her voice carried through comm channels, giving orders that were instantly followed. The aliens attempted to regroup, but every move was anticipated, every retreat cut off, every flank met by a precise counter. Veilcore noticed that the humans did not rely solely on technology or numbers. They relied on adaptability, instinct, and a strange but effective combination of courage and empathy. Injured soldiers continued to fight. Medics worked in the thick of combat. And engineers repaired vital systems while under fire. Civilians who had been trapped in shelters, tunnels, and damaged buildings began to see hope for the first time in days. Human teams reached them quickly, evacuating them to safer zones, treating injuries immediately, and reassuring them through words and gestures. Even in the midst of a brutal battle, the humans did not act like conquerors or outsiders. They acted like protectors. And that made the alien commanders pause. Veilcore observed that human soldiers seemed to draw strength from the lives they were saving. Every successful evacuation boosted their morale, and every act of protection inspired further daring maneuvers. It was as if the humans were stronger when others depended on them, a concept alien species rarely understood, who often saw mercy as weakness. In orbital space, the UTS Iron Veil and UTS Silent Spear worked in tandem to disable enemy ships, yet they also provided cover for ground teams, timing their attacks to suppress threats without harming civilians or infrastructure. Captain Jonas Hale and Captain Arjun Patel executed maneuvers that created safe corridors for evacuation, a strategy that was precise, daring, and entirely human. The aliens, despite superior numbers and firepower, began to lose confidence. They had assumed humans would strike for glory or territory, but instead, humans fought to protect. And that protection came with an intensity no alien military doctrine could predict. Even their own soldiers were astonished at the combination of selflessness and ruthlessness displayed simultaneously. Commander Chen's squad navigated a collapsing orbital station, extracting trapped families while defending against enemy boarding parties. One of her soldiers was injured, yet continued to cover civilians with their own body, a sacrifice unnoticed by most, yet essential to the human strategy. Every human seemed to understand that the mission was not complete until every life that could be saved was saved. Veilcore's tactical screens showed enemy ships being disabled without unnecessary destruction, alien soldiers being captured rather than killed when possible, civilians being moved to evacuation pods and medical shuttles. It was a level of coordination, efficiency, and empathy that alien commanders had only theorized about, never witnessed in practice. By mid-battle, humans had established secure zones on Alarion Prime's surface and orbital stations. Emergency triage and repair teams stabilized critical systems, and the aliens began to retreat in disarray. Human forces did not celebrate. They continued moving, checking on civilians, and ensuring the next wave of attacks would not harm those they were protecting. Veilcore finally realized that these Deathworlders were not fearless because they lacked fear, but because they acted despite it. Their courage was amplified by responsibility. Their strength was fueled by care for others. And their victory was inevitable, not just because of skill, but because they refused to abandon anyone in danger. For the first time in the war, the commander felt hope. The humans had turned desperation into strategy, chaos into order, and fear into motivation. The SOS that had seemed so desperate before now echoed through his mind as a turning point, not for the humans alone, but for all who had survived under their protection. The people of Alarion Prime had found guardians in a species born from harsh worlds, capable of unimaginable survival, yet guided by compassion as fiercely as by force. As enemy reinforcements approached, the humans did not hesitate. Their fleets moved like a single organism, anticipating every maneuver, every strike, every attempt to reclaim lost ground. The UTS Iron Veil, under Captain Jonas Hale, launched precision attacks on alien capital ships, disabling engines, weapon systems, and communication arrays without destroying the hulls. The goal was not mindless destruction but control, creating order out of chaos. The UTS Silent Spear, led by Captain Arjun Patel, executed rapid flanking maneuvers, weaving through asteroid fields and debris, striking enemy ships from angles they could not predict. Confusion spread quickly among alien ranks as coordinated human attacks appeared in places no one had thought possible. These strikes allowed human boarding teams to neutralize threats on damaged enemy vessels while minimizing civilian risk. On the ground, Commander Maya Chen directed squads moving through ruined urban centers and orbital platforms. Human forces secured escape corridors, rescued trapped civilians, and dismantled remaining enemy fortifications. Medics moved alongside soldiers, treating injuries under fire. Engineers repaired critical systems as boarding parties neutralized hostiles. Every action was synchronized, and every human moved with purpose, courage, and determination. Veilcor Threx watched from the planetary command center, astonished, as his own forces faltered against humans who were outnumbered, yet always seemed to be in the right place at the right time. It was not sheer luck, but a combination of instinct, training, and an unrelenting commitment to protect others. Humans were proving that combat skill alone was not enough to define superiority. The aliens attempted counterattacks, sending missile swarms and energy volleys toward evacuation corridors and human positions. Yet every offensive was anticipated and countered. Shield matrices adjusted dynamically to energy spikes. Automated point defense systems intercepted projectiles. And human pilots executed evasive maneuvers that alien engineers could not predict. Each successful defense created opportunities to strike back more effectively. Aboard the UTS Resolute Dawn, Captain Elias Rourke coordinated the entire operation, issuing precise commands that integrated orbital strikes, ground evacuations, and fleet maneuvers. Humans were not fighting blindly. They were adapting constantly, learning enemy behavior in real time, exploiting weaknesses, and protecting civilians at every step. Human boarding teams reached critical enemy vessels, neutralizing officers and disabling weapons. Yet they treated captured enemy personnel with care when possible. A combination of mercy and force that alien soldiers could not understand. The strategy disoriented the opposing fleet, and morale began to collapse. Humans had turned the tide not only through firepower, but by demonstrating discipline, empathy, and adaptability. On Alerion Prime, survivors watched as the humans continued to protect them, even while under heavy attack. Children and elders were guided to evacuation pods. Civilians in orbit were rescued from damaged stations, and medical teams stabilized the wounded. The people began to understand why humans were called Deathworlders, capable of surviving impossible conditions, yet guided by principles that prioritized life even amidst war. Veilcor observed that human strength seemed amplified by the responsibility they carried. Soldiers acted not for personal glory or reward, but because lives depended on them. Every success in evacuation, every strike on enemy positions reinforced their determination, and the aliens struggled to counter a force motivated by more than fear, pride, or conquest. By the end of the day, humans had secured key zones, disabled the majority of the enemy fleet, and evacuated almost all civilians to safety. The aliens were in retreat, their remaining forces scattered and demoralized. Human forces continued to advance cautiously, ensuring no civilians were left behind, and no retaliatory strike could disrupt the fragile stability they had created. Veilcor finally realized that humans were not fearless. They were deliberate, resilient, and unwavering. Their compassion did not limit them, it strengthened them. Humans had combined overwhelming force with mercy, strategy with care, and discipline with adaptability, creating a form of warfare the galaxy had never witnessed. The SOS that had once seemed hopeless had not only been answered, but transformed into a human-led counteroffensive, turning despair into victory, fear into courage, and chaos into protection. The battle demonstrated that humanity's greatest strength lay not only in their skill or weapons, but in their refusal to abandon those who called for help, no matter the cost. With the majority of enemy forces retreating, human teams focused entirely on stabilizing Alerion Prime and ensuring the safety of every survivor. Evacuation pods shuttled civilians from orbiting stations to safer sectors. Medics treated injuries both minor and severe, while engineers worked tirelessly to repair critical infrastructure. Every action was calculated to protect lives rather than conquer territory. Captain Elias Rourke moved through the Resolute Dawn's command bridge, coordinating fleet and ground operations. His calm presence ensured that no task was overlooked, while Captain Jonas Hale of the Iron Veil oversaw remaining enemy ships, neutralizing any potential threat without unnecessary destruction. And Captain Arjun Patel of the Silent Spear patrolled escape routes, making sure no alien combatants could return to disrupt evacuation. Commander Maya Chen led squads through the planet's surface, guiding civilians from shattered cities and collapsed tunnels, carrying injured elders and children, repairing emergency energy shields, and securing vital communication relays. Each human team acted as a unit, moving swiftly and decisively, always keeping in mind that every second mattered and that lives depended on their choices. Supreme Commander Velkor Threx watched in amazement as humans completed tasks that had seemed impossible just hours before. Alien soldiers had retreated to outer orbit, leaving behind damaged ships and abandoned weapons. Yet humans moved carefully, prioritizing rescue over revenge, treatment over retaliation, showing a level of restraint that shocked Velkor, who had never witnessed such a combination of efficiency and mercy. Medical teams from the UTS Black Horizon established temporary hospitals in orbital stations and surface facilities, triaging thousands of injured civilians, stabilizing them for transport, and providing supplies. Engineers restored power to hospitals, water systems, and communications networks, making the planet functional again, even as the enemy threat remained at a distance. The evacuees, once terrified and hopeless, began to see a future beyond immediate survival. Children clung to human soldiers with gratitude. Families thanked medics and engineers repeatedly. And Velkor realized that the humans had done more than defeat an attacking fleet. They had restored hope, a concept alien species rarely equated with warriors. Human forces did not linger unnecessarily. Their mission was clear and disciplined. They did not occupy, they did not claim. They simply ensured that those in danger were safe, and that Alerion Prime could begin recovery. This approach unsettled nearby sectors, where species accustomed to conquest and territorial gain could not understand why humans would risk so much without seeking power or resources. Even with victory assured, humans remained vigilant. Patrols monitored remaining enemy activity. Scouts checked for hidden threats. And emergency teams ensured that civilians had access to shelter, food, and medical attention. Captain Rourke emphasized that leaving anyone behind was not an option, and every officer followed this directive without question. Velkor Threx, who had once believed the situation hopeless, now experienced a rare sense of relief, mixed with profound respect. Humans had not only defeated enemy forces, but had done so while maintaining discipline, compassion, and strategic foresight. He realized that their reputation as Deathworlders was earned not only because they survived harsh worlds, but because they acted decisively to protect others, turning desperation into a force for good. Diplomatic communications began to flow once the immediate danger passed. Humans ensured that no hostile species could exploit the weakened planet, yet they made no claims to control or ownership, simply providing the protection needed to rebuild. Their actions left a lasting impression on Velkor and his people, who began to see humanity as more than a survivor species. They were guardians, capable of unimaginable strength coupled with unwavering ethics. Weeks after the battle, reconstruction began under human supervision. Temporary settlements were established, civilians were relocated to safe zones, and human teams remained to ensure continuity of essential services. Yet they did not stay longer than necessary, leaving Alerion Prime to recover independently while maintaining monitoring for any potential threats. Velkor finally understood the lesson humanity offered the galaxy, that victory could coexist with mercy, that strength could coexist with protection, and that answering a desperate call did not have to result in conquest. The humans had rewritten the rules of engagement, showing that it was possible to fight, win, and leave without domination. By the end of the mission, The planet's population had survived almost entirely. Critical systems were functioning again, and the enemy was in full retreat. Human forces prepared to depart, leaving behind not destruction, but hope, care, and the knowledge that someone had come when they were needed most. A species born on violent worlds had not only fought for survival, but had ensured life and safety for those who could not defend themselves. Weeks after the battle, Alerion Prime slowly began to recover. Human teams had left behind functioning emergency systems, stabilized infrastructure, and civilians who were alive because of their careful planning and relentless effort. The evacuees were safe, and survivors were beginning to rebuild their homes, markets, and communities. But the story of what had happened spread far beyond the planet, reaching every corner of the galaxy. In Galactic Archive Hall Sigma 1, reports of the intervention were recorded and classified. Analysts described the humans not just as skilled fighters, but as a species who combined overwhelming power with mercy. Their actions challenged conventional understanding of warfare, diplomacy, and responsibility. The Galactic Concord updated their assessments, realizing that humanity's reputation as Deathworlders only told part of the story. They were not only survivors, they were guardians. The records described how Task Force Iron Mercy had coordinated every action, from orbital assaults to ground evacuations, and how the humans had ensured civilian safety even while facing superior enemy forces. Captain Elias Rourke, Commander Maya Chen, and Captains Jonas Hale and Arjun Patel were cited repeatedly for exemplary leadership. Their strategies balanced precision, risk, and compassion in ways that alien commanders could barely comprehend. Across alien sectors, whispers spread of the human intervention. Species that had once dismissed humanity as reckless or dangerous now reconsidered. Alerion Prime became a symbol, proof that a species born on violent worlds could act decisively without seeking conquest, victory without vengeance, and strength without cruelty. The alien Supreme Commander Vale Cor Threx wrote detailed accounts of the battle, describing not only the military outcome, but the moral impact of human actions. He noted that they fought not for glory, not for territory, but for lives that were not their own, that they coordinated entire fleets, boarding teams, and ground squads to save as many civilians as possible, and that their commitment to responsibility had turned near certain defeat into a survival story. Even the surviving enemy commanders, who had retreated in disarray, could not ignore the human approach. Their tactical models failed to predict human efficiency, empathy, and adaptability. Reports spread across the galaxy that when humans entered a conflict, it was not simply combat. It was an intervention that combined power and purpose, turning chaos into order and fear into courage. Back on Earth, United Terran Command debriefed the crews of Task Force Iron Mercy, recognizing not just their military achievement, but their ethical approach. The world understood that humans had changed perceptions of what was possible. A species born in harsh conditions could extend mercy while maintaining effectiveness, showing the galaxy a model of force guided by conscience. As months passed, the SOS of Alerion Prime became more than a distress signal. It became a story, a legend, that reminded every species that cries for help could be answered, even across impossible distances, and that some species would come when others would not for profit or political gain, but because they understood the meaning of responsibility and action. The human fleets moved on to patrol other sectors, leaving behind monitoring systems to ensure Alerion Prime remained safe, yet they did not remain as occupiers. The humans had arrived, done what was necessary, and departed, leaving a free world intact, showing that power could coexist with restraint, and that intervention did not require domination. The galaxy slowly adjusted to this reality, and the final report officially reclassified humans in the archives, no longer simply Deathworlders of Sol 3, but Guardians of the Void, a species whose name would carry a warning, a promise, and a symbol of hope. The classification reminded all who read it that when an SOS echoes through space, humans arrive. Even centuries later, historians, diplomats, and strategists would study the intervention at Alerion Prime, noting that it had redefined what it meant to respond to a call for help, showing that courage was not measured in destruction, but in protection, that strength was not measured in conquest, but in care, and that a species born from violence could choose to fight for life, for hope, and for others. Across the stars, the memory of human arrival lingered, a signal to all civilizations that the galaxy contained species capable of unimaginable power, yet guided by conscience. A species that would answer when others ignored the call. A species that had turned a desperate SOS into a story of survival, compassion, and unwavering guardianship. A story that would inspire generations. When the last communication from Task Force Iron Mercy finally reached Galactic Command, it was a simple message, yet it carried enormous meaning, confirming that all civilians had been evacuated, enemy threats neutralized, and Illyrian Prime left in safe hands. It read like a final testament. When an SOS echoes through space, humans arrive, and they come with both strength and mercy.